A mind so strong it paralyzes others begins as a simple, private architecture, a set of convictions about who you are and what you control. Stoicism teaches that the only real goods are virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, temperance, and that external events are neither good nor bad by themselves. Building a formidable mind is therefore not about amassing power or knowledge to impress, but about arranging your interior life so that appearances, praise, and threat pass through you like wind through tall grass. This arrangement requires deliberate choices to value judgment above impulse, to prefer reasoned action over reactive words, and to practice the small disciplines that shape decision-making. Your attention becomes the primary tool. Where it rests, energy follows. Where it wanders, weakness appears. A strong mind disciplines attention through routine's morning reflection to set aims, regular review of failures to extract truth, and nightly accounting to close the day with clarity. These practices create a feedback loop. You learn to prefer what sustains your inner equilibrium: truth, purpose, and steady effort. Paradoxically, the strength that freezes others is often quiet. When you can meet insult without flinching, treat praise with indifference, and hold your aims close regardless of applause, you force others to recalibrate. Their usual levers, shock, spectacle, intimidation, fail. They discover they cannot predict your reactions because you answer from principle, not from the momentary weather. That consistency is practical. People who rely on volatility cannot manipulate someone who responds from a deep, stable center. Building this center is slow work. It is the daily application of small ethical choices until they become the shape of your life. Strength here is ethical, not theatrical. It paralyzes not by spectacle, but by removing the predictable points where others usually pry. When you value only the things within your control and deliberately cultivate the virtues that make you trustworthy and composed, you begin to create a presence that does more than intimidate. It rearranges the dynamics of interaction in your favor because you no longer participate in the little dramas that animate weaker minds. Emotional mastery is the ballast of a strong mind. Stoicism never taught suppression of feeling for its own sake. Instead, it taught discrimination, which responses are useful, which are harmful, and which are merely fleeting noise. Strength grows when you practice observing emotions rather than being swept by them. Use premeditatio malorum, the practice of imagining potential losses, insults, or setbacks, not to become gloomy, but to inoculate your judgment. When you foresee that loss, you reduce its shock. When you foresee mockery, you prepare to answer with calm. This mental foresight trains the nervous system. You no longer react from the sympathetic spike of surprise, but from the slower, steadier reasoning that sees consequences clearly. Another Stoic tool is the separation of impressions from assent. You will receive many impressions, comments, images, provocations. But you control the assent, whether you accept the charge that an insult landed, whether you let a rumor alter your plans. Over time, this restraint produces a curious social effect. People used to quick reactivity find their tactics defanged. Their barbs land on a surface that does not ripple. Sometimes that silence unsettles them. Humans expect reflexes. When you consistently refuse the usual scripts, outrage, petty retaliation, gossipy amplification, you create cognitive friction in others. They must invent new strategies to influence you. Often they can't. Emotional mastery is not showy. It does not require the loudness of an angry leader. Instead, it is the quiet, visible rejection of volatility. That quiet suggests resource. Someone with calm reserves is implicitly harder to topple in crisis and more reliable in planning. Others notice reliability and either defer or become uncertain. That uncertainty is a form of paralysis. They lose their habitual ways of getting results. You gain time and space, and what better place is there for decisive action than in a pause the world did not anticipate? Finally, emotional mastery opens your cognitive bandwidth. Less energy spent reacting leaves more energy for judgment. This compound advantage differentiates those who merely survive storms from those who steer ships through them. Clarity of values is the map for a strong mind. Without anchored values, decisions become improvisations, and improvisation invites anxiety. Stoic practice insists on explicit standards: what counts as success, which behaviors are non-negotiable, what sacrifices you'll accept for long-term aims. Writing these down is not sentimental, it's tactical. If you clarify that honesty is central, you will design relationships, contracts, and public statements differently. If temperance is central, you will reject short pleasures that sabotage your capacity for sustained effort. Once established, these values act as a lens that filters choices automatically. When a new proposal arrives, you no longer ask merely whether it is profitable or popular. You ask whether it aligns with the set of virtues that define you. That filter short circuits confusion and second guessing, which are major causes of social paralysis in others. People who expect you to be malleable suddenly discover you are not. The social consequence is consistent. Others must renegotiate assumptions about you. This produces hesitation, a mild paralysis, because habitual leverage points evaporate. To deepen value clarity, use daily practices, a brief morning intention that names the day's central value, mid-day micro reflections to check alignment, and a release ritual at night where you list where you succeeded and where you compromised. Over months, these rituals sculpt instinct. Choices that once required debate become effortless because your muscle memory is tuned to your values. That effortless decision making is itself intimidating in peaceful ways. It signals to others that you have already done the inner work of scale. You can endure discomfort, sacrifice for better ends, and refuse easy rewards that undermine strategy. When you operate from such clarity, you also reduce regret and internal conflict, which otherwise leak into conversation as indecisiveness. The less you waver, the harder it is for opponents to find seams in your resolve. Far from being rigid, a values-led mind is also flexible within its frame. It can pivot tactically while remaining ethically consistent. This balance confers credibility, and credibility is a social force more paralyzing than noise. Train will like a muscle through deliberate, uncomfortable practice. Stoics favored exercises that simulate hardship so the actual hardships become manageable. Start small and escalate. Everyday disciplines, waking early, controlled fasting, focused reading for a fixed time, cold showers, or short spells of solitude, are not displays of masochism. They are investments in the capacity to choose. Each act of will you win over trivial discomfort compounds. One controlled morning creates momentum for a dozen controlled decisions that day, and after many days this momentum becomes tendency. You begin to prefer the path that requires discipline. Also adopt cognitive drills, set a timer, and force yourself to work on a single task without distraction for 30 minutes. Practice reframing. When faced with a difficulty, name the opportunities within it. Apply negative visualization for 5 minutes to reduce surprise and broaden strategic options. Will is not only endurance, it is directed attention. When practiced, will enables you to tolerate uncertainty and still act. This makes you a strange presence while others hesitate, calibrating risks and checking opinions. You decide and move. That movement, anchored in reasonable calculation and habit, creates a momentum that paralyzes those who rely on frozen consensus before action. They watch you act with a calm they do not possess and become uncertain whether caution still serves them. Another training axis is speech. Practice saying no in low-stakes contexts until you can assert boundaries in higher-stakes ones. People who are accustomed to compliant yeses will find your firm, clear no disruptive. It halts their plans because their assumptions about easy compliance die in that moment. Finally, cultivate steady exposure to real responsibility, voluntary responsibility. Mentoring someone, leading a consistent small project, owning a weekly commitment, teaches you how to balance other people's expectations with your resources. Responsibility forces the will to grow in a meaningful direction. It makes your choices consequential beyond your ego. And consequence breeds a different kind of confidence. Not bravado, but authority. That authority is contagious and often immobilizes those who traded long-term competence for short-term approval. A mind that paralyzes others socially does so less by force and more by atmosphere. Calm, competence, and moral clarity form an aura that shifts dynamics. People operate with tacit models of others who will get angry, who will cave, who will prioritize image over truth. When you violate those models by consistently acting from calm competence, you cause cognitive dissonance. The typical manipulator relies on predictable emotional responses, fear, flattery, shame, envy, to move people. But a person who models indifference to manipulation collapses those levers. Instead of escalating, manipulators often freeze, searching for a new sequence that will work. That freeze is the paralysis you create. Another facet is integrity in speech and action. When your words consistently match your deeds, others learn that rhetorical pressure won't change outcomes. They discover that your commitments are not negotiable press fittings but structural features. This discovery slows attempts at quiet coercion and forces opponents into slower, more honest negotiation. Additionally, mastering silence is a potent social skill. Most people feel compelled to fill conversational space to persuade or to appear involved. Your willingness to stay silent, to listen with attention, and then answer precisely is disruptive. Silence gives you time to shape your response and robs the other person of the usual feedback that drives them toward victory. When you respond with economy rather than loquacious reactivity, your words weigh more. People misinterpret this economy as superior insight, which contributes to the paralysis effect. Boundaries matter too. Clear, enforced boundaries, not vindictive, but non-negotiable. Stop small incursions before they compound. Boundaries display the arithmetic of your tolerance. When you draw the line, others recalibrate their behavior. Finally, competence visible in tasks and commitments persuades in a way words cannot. Do the work well, deliver reliably, and let your track record speak. People who depend on shaky competence for their status cannot meet you on that terrain. They are forced to either improve or be sidelined, and that forced pause is another form of paralysis. In sum, the social paralysis of others is less about fear and more about the bewilderment that comes from encountering someone whose inner economy, attention, values, will, competence cannot be bought, bullied, or hurried. Discipline of thought is a cornerstone of a mind that immobilizes others. Most people live under the tyranny of fragmented attention, reacting to notifications, gossip, and fleeting moods. A strong mind refuses these distractions. Stoics called this assent only to rational impressions. You do not believe every thought that passes through your mind. You do not act on every impulse. Instead, you observe, analyze, and choose. Start by identifying recurring mental patterns that weaken judgment, anxiety over approval, resentment over slights, envy of peers. Document them. Track how they influence decisions. Then, systematically redirect attention to what is within your control, your effort, your reasoned choices, your moral conduct. This constant pruning of mental clutter increases clarity. When others engage you, they encounter a mental presence that is not scattered, reactive, or emotional. This makes them uncertain. They cannot predict how you will respond because your mind operates from principle, not habit. The result is subtle paralysis. People hesitate, overthink, and lose the leverage they usually depend on. This mental discipline extends to strategy. Every conversation, project, or negotiation becomes a chessboard. You see patterns before they fully form, anticipate reactions without anxiety, and act with deliberation rather than impulse. When you consistently operate from this level of clarity, you force others to recalibrate their expectations. They are used to negotiating with reactive minds. Now, they confront someone who is deliberate, patient, and strategically untouchable. Over time, this habitual presence changes the social environment itself. People become cautious around you because their usual manipulations fail. They cannot destabilize you with drama, fear, or flattery. This isn't intimidation by volume or aggression. It is intimidation through presence. The more you cultivate disciplined thought, the more automatic this effect becomes. Others sense that their emotional tactics no longer yield results. They feel disoriented because you have removed the predictable patterns they rely upon. By mastering attention and thought, you create an invisible architecture of strength that makes reactive, weak-minded behavior ineffective and slows the momentum of those who seek to unsettle you. Stoicism emphasizes preparation as the antidote to fear, and preparation strengthens the mind to the point where others falter. People are often paralyzed by unexpected challenges because they rely on improvisation under pressure. A trained mind reduces the unknown to scenarios you have mentally rehearsed. Premeditation, or negative visualization, allows you to simulate setbacks, confront fears, and plan rational responses. Imagine losing wealth, facing betrayal, or enduring public humiliation. Then consider how you will respond with reason and virtue. This mental rehearsal builds confidence, so when events occur, your body and mind react with precision rather than panic. Observers notice the difference. Where others flail or hesitate, you move deliberately and calmly. This produces social paralysis. Peers cannot anticipate mistakes or manipulate your reactions. Beyond emotional mastery, preparation cultivates strategic foresight. You can evaluate options without urgency, weighing long-term consequences over immediate gratification. Strong minds act like navigators. They see currents and obstacles invisible to those who react impulsively. Practicing this foresight daily, through journaling, scenario planning, or reflective meditation, compounds mental resilience. People feel paralyzed around someone who seems several steps ahead because it is difficult to manipulate or predict them. They no longer rely on conventional pressures, intimidation, gossip, or public opinion to influence decisions. Preparation also fosters decisiveness. A trained mind can pivot without hesitation, choose without doubt, and commit without anxiety. Others, accustomed to hesitation and compromise, often pause before acting, unsure if their moves will provoke a reaction or be ignored. The combination of premeditation, emotional control, and decisiveness creates a presence that is both calm and unassailable. Strength becomes visible not through aggression, but through reliability, consistency, and foresight. Social paralysis emerges naturally. The more consistent and prepared you are, the more unpredictable and immovable you appear to others, forcing them to pause, rethink, and lose habitual leverage. Stoicism emphasizes preparation as the antidote to fear, and preparation strengthens the mind to the point where others falter. People are often paralyzed by unexpected challenges because they rely on improvisation under pressure. A trained mind reduces the unknown to scenarios you have mentally rehearsed. Premeditation, or negative visualization, allows you to simulate setbacks, confront fears, and plan rational responses. Imagine losing wealth, facing betrayal, or enduring public humiliation. Then consider how you will respond with reason and virtue. This mental rehearsal builds confidence, so when events occur, your body and mind react with precision rather than panic. Observers notice the difference. Where others flail or hesitate, you move deliberately and calmly. This produces social paralysis. Peers cannot anticipate mistakes or manipulate your reactions. Beyond emotional mastery, preparation cultivates strategic foresight. You can evaluate options without urgency, weighing long-term consequences over immediate gratification. Strong minds act like navigators. They see currents and obstacles invisible to those who react impulsively. Practicing this foresight daily, through journaling, scenario planning, or reflective meditation, compounds mental resilience. People feel paralyzed around someone who seems several steps ahead because it is difficult to manipulate or predict them. They no longer rely on conventional pressures, intimidation, gossip, or public opinion to influence decisions. Preparation also fosters decisiveness. A trained mind can pivot without hesitation, choose without doubt, and commit without anxiety. Others, accustomed to hesitation and compromise, often pause before acting, unsure if their moves will provoke a reaction or be ignored. The combination of premeditation, emotional control, and decisiveness creates a presence that is both calm and unassailable. Strength becomes visible not through aggression, but through reliability, consistency, and foresight. Social paralysis emerges naturally. The more consistent and prepared you are, the more unpredictable and immovable you appear to others, forcing them to pause, rethink, and lose habitual leverage. A strong mind is forged in solitude and reflection. Solitude is not mere loneliness, but a deliberate withdrawal to examine thoughts, actions, and values without interference. Stoics practiced this daily, using time alone to clarify judgment and separate true needs from superficial wants. Through reflection, you identify patterns that compromise mental strength, impulsive reactions, attachment to praise, or fear of rejection. By addressing these in private, you prevent them from dictating public behavior. The power of this practice lies in self-sufficiency. When others rely on external validation, their influence grows. When you are grounded in internal reason, external pressures fail. Solitude also nurtures creativity and strategy. Alone, you can simulate multiple courses of action and predict human behavior more clearly. When you return to interaction, you operate with a calm authority that seems effortless. People are naturally unsettled by those who derive energy internally rather than from affirmation. This internal source is the foundation of mental fortitude. Reflection also allows assessment of failures without judgment. Learning from mistakes in solitude prevents embarrassment and impulsive repair attempts in public, maintaining composure. Over time, disciplined reflection shapes a mind that is anticipatory, unshakable, and centered. Others perceive this as a unique presence. They cannot provoke frustration or fear because your response is measured, deliberate, and grounded in principle. Paradoxically, retreating from noise strengthens influence. By stepping back, you emerge stronger, more focused, and socially disarming. Solitude becomes a training ground, transforming vulnerability into strategy. The ability to detach from outcomes is a critical trait of a mind that immobilizes others. Stoicism teaches that while effort is within our control, results are not. Most people entangle themselves in outcomes, craving success, fearing failure, or seeking approval, and this dependency exposes weakness. A strong mind invests fully in action without attachment to external validation. This detachment produces calmness under pressure. When others are anxious, reactive, or manipulative, your measured response is disorienting. They anticipate panic, flattery, or emotional surrender, but encounter a composed, autonomous presence. Detachment does not mean apathy. Instead, it allows engagement with clarity, efficiency, and ethical consistency. Decisions are made based on reason and principle, not fleeting emotions or societal pressures. This approach produces a subtle paralysis in others, those accustomed to using outcomes as leverage. Threats of failure, promises of reward, discover that their usual tools are ineffective. You operate outside the normal social levers. Detachment also reinforces resilience. Setbacks, criticism, or unexpected changes do not derail action because your focus remains on internal virtue and effort. Others perceive this resilience and unconsciously adjust expectations, often hesitating because they cannot predict reactions or exploit weakness. The combination of action-oriented detachment, ethical consistency, and visible composure cultivates both respect and caution. People pause before challenging you, realizing conventional pressures hold no sway. A mind trained to detach from outcomes achieves efficiency and strategic advantage while maintaining moral clarity. A dual power that immobilizes those who rely on fear, flattery, or uncertainty as tools of influence. Focus on long-term mastery rather than short-term recognition. Stoicism emphasizes patience and incremental improvement as pillars of mental strength. Strength is not built in a day. It is the accumulation of disciplined choices over months and years. Most people are impulsive, chasing immediate gratification, social approval, or emotional highs. A strong mind resists these temptations, prioritizing sustained competence and growth. This slow accumulation of skill, wisdom, and self-control produces an invisible authority. Others, accustomed to reactive minds, are confused by the consistent calm, reliability, and competence they encounter. Their normal levers, intimidation, persuasion, peer pressure, fail. The long-term thinker acts with patience, anticipating moves and consequences others cannot see, and this foresight generates social and strategic paralysis. Over time, deliberate patience transforms perception. You are not merely competent, you become unshakable. The cumulative effect is profound. People hesitate, recalibrate, and often defer to your judgment, even unconsciously, because they sense depth, preparation, and self-mastery that exceeds typical expectations. Mastery over self, time, and action becomes an aura that discourages interference, manipulations, and needless conflict. By committing to incremental, principled improvement, you create not only a mind strong enough to withstand adversity, but a presence that subtly paralyzes others through the sheer gravity of cultivated inner strength. Control over attention is a hallmark of a mind that paralyzes others. Most people scatter their energy across distractions, gossip, and superficial concerns. A disciplined mind chooses where to place focus. Stoics teach that your judgments, decisions, and efforts should only respond to what truly matters: virtue, reason, and meaningful action. To cultivate this, begin by identifying attention leaks, social media, unnecessary arguments, or idle curiosity. Remove or limit these inputs. Replace them with deliberate mental exercises, reading philosophy, observing nature, journaling, or planning actions in detail. Over time, your mind becomes a lens that filters the irrelevant automatically. This filtering is visible to others. They sense your focus and consistency, and attempts to distract or manipulate you often fail. People unconsciously hesitate when they realize their usual tactics. Gossip, flattery, or provocation do not work. A mind that controls attention also directs energy efficiently. You can multitask with composure, handle crises without panic, and analyze situations without impulsive reactions. Your presence communicates efficiency, preparedness, and resilience. Others, accustomed to chaotic thinking, are intimidated by the effortless clarity you project. Over time, focused attention compounds into decisive action, and your consistent execution becomes a social force. Those around you often experience a form of paralysis because their strategies for influence rely on scattered minds. And you are not one. Self-discipline is the backbone of mental fortitude. Stoicism emphasizes repeated practice of virtue through small, deliberate actions. Willpower is strengthened when you voluntarily undertake tasks that challenge comfort, waking early, fasting, physical training, or intellectual rigor. Each act of self-control reinforces the belief that you are capable of managing impulses, emotions, and desire. Over months and years, this builds resilience that is both visible and palpable. When people interact with someone who demonstrates self-discipline, they notice a presence resistant to manipulation. Your calm consistency unnerves those accustomed to volatility because they cannot predict reactions. Discipline extends to speech and action. You say what is necessary, act with precision, and avoid impulsive exaggeration. This economy of expression is socially paralyzing because it disrupts expectation. Others cannot anticipate your next move or leverage emotional responses. Over time, self-discipline becomes internalized, forming habits that no external pressure can easily disrupt. This habitual control translates into authority. People respect, defer to, and sometimes hesitate around someone whose life is visibly ordered and principled. A disciplined mind is not rigid. It is strategically adaptable while anchored in enduring virtue. This balance magnifies social influence and ensures your presence commands attention and restraint from others. A strong mind understands the impermanence of external validation. Stoics remind us that praise, fame, and wealth are fleeting and often unreliable. Dependence on these is a weakness others can exploit. To build a paralyzing mind, cultivate internal validation, trust your judgment, value integrity, and measure success by effort rather than approval. When you operate independently of recognition, your behavior is consistent, deliberate, and immune to manipulation. Others find this unsettling because their usual levers, flattery, social comparison, or public pressure, fail. You act from principle, not reward. This internal grounding also fosters resilience. Criticism, rejection, or setbacks no longer provoke panic or overreaction because your sense of self-worth is internally sourced. Social paralysis emerges subtly. People hesitate, unsure how to influence or predict a mind that does not bend to conventional incentives. By consistently valuing internal standards over external applause, you develop authority without aggression. Your presence communicates confidence, reason, and stability. Others defer to your judgment or pause before challenging you, not out of fear, but because your consistent composure renders normal pressures ineffective. Strategic patience amplifies mental strength. Stoicism teaches that the wise delay gratification for long-term benefit and respond after careful observation rather than rash impulse. A mind trained in patience exudes calm authority because it resists provocation. People expect immediate reactions. When you pause, they are disoriented. This pause is a subtle form of paralysis, forcing them to reconsider timing, tactics, and assumptions. Patience allows evaluation of context, motives, and consequences before action, enhancing decision quality. The more consistently you exercise patience, the more it compounds. People sense you will not be rushed, swayed, or manipulated. Strategic patience is not inaction. It is deliberate, calculated action at the optimal moment. Others perceive this as foresight, discipline, and confidence, which slows their usual manipulative behaviors. Over time, your controlled response becomes a social tool, establishing authority without hostility. A resilient mind is built through acceptance of reality. Stoics emphasize embracing what cannot be changed and focusing energy on what can. Mental paralysis of others arises when you remain composed under conditions that unsettle most people. Acceptance does not mean passivity. It is clear-eyed acknowledgement of circumstances, followed by deliberate, virtuous action. This composure is socially disruptive because humans expect panic, overreaction, or complaint under stress. By remaining calm, you destabilize assumptions about human behavior. Acceptance also fosters adaptability. When events deviate from plan, you respond rationally rather than emotionally. This steadiness forces others to pause, reassess, and often defer to your judgment. Over time, acceptance strengthens resilience, decision-making, and social influence. Those around you become hesitant because they cannot predict disruption from fear, frustration, or uncertainty, all of which your mind has neutralized. Mastery of perspective is a hallmark of a paralyzing mind. Stoicism teaches that events are not inherently good or bad. Interpretation determines impact. By reframing challenges as opportunities for growth, you reduce vulnerability to emotional disruption. Others, expecting reactive behavior, find it disconcerting when you maintain calm, rational judgment under pressure. Perspective amplifies strategic thinking. You can anticipate motives, predict reactions, and respond with clarity. This mental clarity slows opponents because their usual emotional levers are ineffective. Perspective also enables compassion, wisdom, and patience, all of which signal authority. People hesitate around someone capable of reframing events calmly because it indicates a mental depth they cannot easily manipulate. A strong mind embraces self-reliance. Stoicism encourages reliance on personal judgment, effort, and virtue rather than external approval. Independence creates social friction. Those accustomed to leverage through dependency cannot control someone who stands autonomously. Self-reliance reinforces confidence, clarity, and strategic flexibility. Others, encountering such autonomy, hesitate because typical levers of influence, flattery, fear, peer pressure, lose effect. Social paralysis emerges naturally. Autonomous individuals do not participate in ordinary manipulative dynamics. Self-reliance also enhances resilience. Setbacks and opposition no longer disrupt judgment. Over time, this independence becomes evident in demeanor, decision-making, and presence, amplifying both authority and influence. A mind that commands respect and induces hesitation in others practices deliberate communication. Stoics value clarity, conciseness, and truthfulness in speech. Avoid impulsive words, exaggeration, or unnecessary commentary. When you speak only when necessary and with precision, people notice your composure and restraint. Silence becomes a tool. Leaving space unsettles those accustomed to filling it with persuasion or distraction. Economy of expression communicates confidence, preparation, and authority. Social paralysis occurs because interlocutors pause, uncertain how to engage someone who does not react predictably. Over time, disciplined communication builds trust, influence, and presence. making ordinary attempts at manipulation ineffective. Consistency amplifies the strength of the mind. Stoics teach that virtue is demonstrated through repeated, reliable action. A person who acts predictably from principle, not impulse, creates both confidence and hesitation in others. When peers cannot provoke emotional shifts or expect inconsistent behavior, they experience subtle paralysis. Consistency signals stability, foresight, and authority. Beyond social influence, internal consistency reinforces self-trust. Decisions become automatic, aligned with virtue, and resistant to external pressure. Over time, repeated disciplined action forms a presence that is unshakable, ethical, and strategically influential. Finally, integration of all these principles produces a mind so formidable that it naturally paralyzes others. Attention control, emotional mastery, preparation, detachment, patience, perspective, discipline, self-reliance, and strategic communication combine into a cohesive mental architecture. People encounter an individual whose reactions are measured, whose values are consistent, and whose presence communicates authority. Attempts at manipulation fail, social pressure loses leverage, and uncertainty emerges around someone operating from internal principles rather than reactive emotion. Strength of mind does not rely on aggression, intimidation, or dominance. It arises from cultivated virtue, disciplined thought, and deliberate action. Over time, this integrated practice produces both inner resilience and external social influence, creating a mind that commands respect, elicits caution, and subtly paralyzes others through the sheer force of principled presence.